Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining the New York Charter Schools Association Statewide webinar. I'm Yomika Bennett, the Executive Director of the New York Charter Schools Association. I'm joined by Anna Hall, CEO, Northeast Charter Schools Network, Janet Klein, Associate in Education Research in the Charter Schools Office at NYSED, Catherine Connell Espinoza, Chief of Staff at the SUNY Charter Schools Institute, Erin Cochran, Deputy Executive Director, Policy and Operations at New York City DOE, and Corey Callahan, General Counsel and VP of Legal Policy at the New York City Charter School Center. Welcome back to our monthly webinar for March. With the month now in full swing, we want to wish everyone a happy Women's History Month. The association is proud to celebrate and would love to highlight the ways our schools are observing this month. The association will be spotlighting the work of many of our fantastic school leaders through our Making History in Education campaign on social media. If you want to nominate someone, have some good ideas, please let us know. You know our email. You know how to contact us. Please let us know. And, again, happy Women's History Month. We'll begin today with updates from the association and our partners, followed by a Q&A. After the Q&A, we will have a special presentation on some very interesting findings from a study done by the Center on Research for Education Outcomes on the impact of COVID-19 on charter schools in New York State. Very excited about that. Big news from last week in the news that continues to reverberate is the lifting of the statewide mask mandate for schools in New York. We are sharing the memo from New York State Department of Health in chat along with an FAQ document which provides supplemental information on the implications of lifting the statewide mask mandate. Schools, of course, should read that very closely because there are some instances, of course, when a mask would be required. We strongly encourage you to follow up with your local health department for any specific advice. We received several inquiries about whether schools could continue to have a mask policies. Schools should consult with their legal counsel and authorizers, and of course, again, I'm going to repeat your local health department for approval and advice. The association, through its operations working group, will be doing a deeper dive into the revised guidance during our meeting on Friday, March 18th at 10 a.m. At the meeting, we will have a presentation and Q&A on the revised guidance and have an opportunity for schools to share their safety plans and policies. To register for this meeting, please use the link we are dropping in the chat. We want to remind everyone that the legislative session is in full swing, and the association continues to advocate for a state budget that addresses the needs for all students and families. Our Stand Up for Ed Equity platform ensures that all students, regardless of their income, background, are treated fairly, equitably in the provision of educational resources. You can join in these efforts and make your voice heard by going to the link that is being dropped in the chat. From here, you can learn more about the ways to improve educational opportunities for students, which you all know, but you can know our platform and what we're advocating for, and more importantly, send letters to representatives to ensure a fair and equitable budget is passed. Those letters are important. Please share that link with your families, your students, your neighbors, your friends, strangers. All are invited. Please go to the site, Stand Up for Education Equity, and send those letters. We ask again that you share those links with your families and communities so they too can send a message to their elected officials. This week, it is expected that the one-house budgets from the Assembly and the Senate will be released. Once they're out, and we will review and send you an update. On March 1st, the New York State Legislature held elections for 3 members of the Board of Regents. 2 regents were reelected. Susan Mittler was reelected to the 6th Judicial District, which covers Ithaca and Elmira in the western central part of the state. Ruth Turner was reelected in the 7th Judicial District, which covers Monroe County and Rochester. Finally, Shino Tanakawa will be joining the Board of Regents from the 1st Judicial District in New York City. The association will be holding 2 special webinars over the next few weeks. The first, Independence webinar on Wednesday, March 23rd. Let me start that one again. Independence webinar. On Wednesday, March 23rd at 4 p.m., the association is hosting a webinar that will feature national charter school autonomy experts to provide school leaders with the information and tools needed to understand the trends, implications, and steps that can be taken now to preserve your school's flexibility and unique attributes. School leaders can RSVP for this webinar by clicking on the registration link that will be in the chat. We'd also like to invite all charter school human resource representatives to a special webinar on April 7th at 4 p.m. The webinar topic will be the Public Service Forgiveness Loan. Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, Many of your employees may be eligible for service toward the Federal Loan Forgiveness Program. This program can be a powerful recruiting and retention tool for your staff. To learn more about the PSLF, please share the registration details for this webinar with your school's HR representatives. You can use the registration link that we're dropping in the chat. There's less than a month left for graduating seniors to apply for the association's Aspiring Educators and Leader Scholarship. The deadline for all applications is April 1st, 2022. This scholarship will award 5 graduating seniors from association member high schools with a $1,000 award to pursue their post-secondary studies. The association is looking for scholars who have demonstrated academic success during their time at a New York State charter school, a track record of service to their school or community, and are interested in pursuing a career in education or social service. Member high schools should share the details of this scholarship, which can be found on our scholarship page, with your guidance counselors, teachers, students, and families. The New York State Charter Parent Council will host its February meeting on Wednesday, March 9th at 6 p.m. That's tomorrow. During this meeting, our regional community engagement managers will be providing updates on the budget and other advocacy topics. Parents are powerful advocates. The Parent Council is scheduling meetings with legislators and school board members for their parents. Please share the flyer we are dropping in the chat with your school communities. Invite them to the meeting and encourage them to join the Parent Council so they can join the fight for school choice and high-quality schools. We want to make sure that schools are aware of an approaching deadline for ESSER and EER funding. I say GEAR funding, but we'll see. Reporting. All LEAs are required to submit a survey through NYSED Business Portal by April 1st, 2022. The survey will cover how the school used their allotted COVID recovery funds. The instructions and a memo outlining the steps for completing this reporting are being dropped in the chat. Additionally, NYSED is holding a webinar tomorrow, March 9th, from 11 to 12:30 to assist schools in the completion of this reporting. The link to the Zoom meeting can be found in the shared memo. We know that schools are still working with families to ensure reliable internet connectivity at home. We wanted to share a resource that may help these families. Through the federal infrastructure bill, the Affordable Connectivity Program has enabled over 10 million households to access steeply discounted broadband services. Schools can help connect families to the ACP, and we are providing a resource sheet for all schools to use in the chat. Those are all the updates. Now I'll turn it over to our esteemed guest. We'll start here. We're going to start with Catherine for any updates, and then we'll go to Janet. And
all right, well, thank you. Thank you very much, Yamika. For those of you who have not met me before, my name is Catherine Connell Espinoza. I'm the Chief of Staff at the SUNY Charter Schools Institute, and I just want to thank everybody for being here today. While I do not have any institute-specific updates, I want to thank all of the school leaders for your willingness to take the time and participate in the Credo survey and sharing your thoughts amid a global pandemic while trying to day in and day out support your students and families and the entire school communities that you serve. Everybody did such a great job, so we are equally as excited as you are to hear from our friends today from Credo. So we look forward to hearing from Mackie and Meg. And that is it for me, Yamika. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Hi, Janet. Do you have any updates for us?
Hi, everybody. I just want to say thank you for having me. I really enjoy being here. And I know you're all as excited as I am to hear from Credo. So I'm going to try and make it brief, but there are a couple of things I do need to mention today. You may have noticed outside, we have sunshine, we have birds, we have robins, and that means it's springtime and it's time for surveys. Surveys everywhere. The first one I want to mention is the annual Charter School Office, SED Charter School Office, Parent, Teacher, and Student Surveys. Those apply only to the Board of Regents authorized charter schools. We have encountered a bit of a technical difficulty that we are working on, but we hope to get them out to the field by the end of the week. And we intend to give you hopefully at least 30 days in order to get as much parental voice, teacher voice, and student voice in these surveys. We're really looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say. Now, the second thing, this one is for all charter schools. And truthfully, you're the first ones who get to find out about it. On Thursday in the P20 meetings to the program managers and superintendents, the IRS is going to announce it to everyone, but they gave me permission to announce it to you especially. So you guys are first to hear. The department is undertaking efforts to understand and address the pandemic's impact on education data systems. And they are partnering with the Education Commission of the states, the Data Quality Campaign, DataSmith Solutions, and the Council of Chief State School Officers on a project with other state education agencies to learn about the impact the pandemic is having on data and information requests, data collections and systems, and funding issues to support systemic changes. The responses received from this survey will inform a series of meetings with state leaders to inform policy. So it's a high stakes kind of survey, and they really want to hear from everyone. The idea is that there is one survey submitted per district or per charter school. They expect that it should be the person who's responsible for the reporting of data to the Level 2 Student Information Repository System. Now, the survey is open. My associate is going to be dropping the link in the chat. And if you have any questions about this particular survey after you take a look at it, she's also dropping the address of Nancy Smith of DataSmith Solutions. And that's all I have. And again, thank you for having me today.
I can dive right in with updates from New York City. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us here today. A couple of quick updates for charter schools in New York City. So we held an operations training on Friday related to transfer discharge guidance, the third-party process, and some OPT training. So you can find those materials in the C Weekly today if you were not able to register for that training. There will also be a follow-up office hour on the 18th. You can find the registration link in the C Weekly. If you are encountering some challenging situations with non-responsive families or other situations where maybe the discharge process is not quite clear, we invite you to attend that. A couple of important reminders for schools that are participating in the DOE COVID-19 testing program. It is a requirement to submit on a monthly basis your numbers of vaccinated students. I'm going to pop that survey in the link. We are currently doing a close review of the schools that have not been completing that on a monthly basis. And some schools that have not submitted that data may be discontinued. So as soon as I'm done talking, I'll pop that survey in the chat. Additionally, a reminder, lots of surveys to echo Janet. We are interested in getting your tentative summer and fall plans. Are you thinking about moving sites? When are you thinking about starting, so that we can support with resources and coordinating with services? So I'm going to pop our summer and fall survey in the chat as well. If you have not yet responded, please do so as soon as possible. We know that at this point in the year, your plans are likely tentative. As a reminder, the P6 portal is opening on March 18th, and there is a training listed in the C Weekly. And additionally, most urgently, tomorrow, there is a spring test coordinator training for the ELA and math state tests. I'm going to pop the registration link in the chat as soon as I am done speaking as well. We know there are a lot of new folks. This is the first time seeing it, so we definitely encourage folks to have their teams attend that training. And those are all my updates.
All right, thank you. Right now, I'm going to turn it over. Now we're going to go to Q&A. I do have one question.
Sorry, if I could just go real quick.
Unmute herself. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to read the Zoom nonverbals.
Sorry. So just wanted to make a comment about the mask mandates changing in New York City. As folks know, we have our biweekly call this Friday with the New York City Department of Health and the DOE. So I'll just prop that in the chat if folks have not registered. But did want to just put out that, we've been very closely reading the guidance put out by the state and staying in touch with the New York City Department of Health in terms of what the actual guidance will be in terms of individual charter schools having the ability to make their own decisions of mask mandates, particularly around requirement. I think that as folks, I'm sure, are seeing, there are many district schools. Principals are sending emails to their families and staff saying, we are highly recommending, we want you to keep in masks. I'm sure there are schools that have done that as well, but just really want to put at the forefront before folks are making decisions to exclude any students from school who are refusing to wear masks, that you please consult your counsel, because as of right now, we have not seen our local health department give the authority to any individual school, whether it be charter, district, or private, to make their own requirement of you have to wear a mask to be in school. So just want to put that out. We will obviously be discussing this on Friday, but we have gotten at the center several questions exactly on that issue. And so just wanted to share, we're paying attention, and we'll let you know as we get more. That was it. Thanks, Yumika.
No problem. All clear, ready to go to Q&A. I do have one question. Okay. The question received advance, and this I'm sure is going to be for Janet. What is the current status of requirements around fire safety drills?
Hi, yes, thank you. You sent it to me early so I could do just a little bit of research. And what I discovered was that all of this is covered under Education Law 807. And you can look it up if you like reading laws. In general, though, any law isn't really good until you have some SED memos to go along with it. So in September of 2020, during the COVID pandemic, there was a memo, a large 6-page memo that went out that was very detailed about fire drills and safety drills. But then in November, a second memo came out. It was a clarifying memo. It's only, I think, 2 or 3 pages long, and it's very specific about exactly what's expected when it comes to fire drills. In general, by this point in time in the school year, you should have, I believe it's 8 fire drills already done. They were supposed to happen between the start of school and December 31st. And there are 12 total that are required during the school year, unless, of course, you have summer school, in which case there's other additions, et cetera, et cetera. But all of that is covered in the memos, and my associate should be dropping those in the chat. Does that help with the question?
That's it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right. We don't have any more questions. Did we miss any? I'm going to turn it over to Anna.
Yes, Yumika, there was one in the chat that I would love for you and Corey to delicately, collaboratively opine on. What stance do we think the new Manhattan Regent will take re-charters? Who wants to go first?
I think want is the strong verb.
Yeah.
I'm not
How about this? I am going to place in the chat an article that was penned by the new regent. And I think folks should read that if you haven't already, because I believe the position on charters is pretty clearly laid out. There might be others as well, but yes, that is what I can say on our statewide everyone watching call.
Thank you, Corey. That was excellent diplomacy. Yumika, any additional thoughts?
I'm just going to say I couldn't have said it better than Corey, so I won't.
I would just add, for any schools that are in the first judicial district, and if you don't know whether or not you're in the first judicial district, which is in Manhattan, we can drop a link in the chat to check. Regents appointments are for 5 years. And if someone wants to stay a regent after 5 years, typically they do. And so while I think you can draw your own conclusions from the article, I would also encourage us to not hide the great light of the work that you all are doing under a bushel, or make it a foregone conclusion. And I don't know if there's a more technical term than killer with kindness, but I think Corey, maybe, I can look in a crystal ball and say that we at the association and the folks at the Charter Center will link arms and help every single school in that judicial district send a lovely invitation to every single amazing thing that your students will be doing for the next 5 years.
Absolutely. What we will always say is people are always movable. So that is our take. And so showing the great work your schools are doing, we will be highlighting and doing that. So we will go with the glass is half full approach. So thank you, Anna.
The charter growth mindset at work.
Yeah.
Yomika, I think those are all of the questions I saw in the chat. If folks have others, now's a great opportunity before we really welcome and roll out the red carpet for our friends at Credo. And we're so honored and thrilled as always when they're able to join us.
Okay, I think we have one question for the DOE. Has the new ACR template been released?
We will have an update for
Aaron
that.
got that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry. We'll have an update for that this week.
Very good. All right, then we will move on to introductions, seeing no more questions. And we are very happy to introduce two folks from the Center on Research and Education Outcomes, also known, of course, as CREDO, who are here to share their findings on a recent study of charter schools in New York State, California, and Washington. Their research has illuminated the experiences of charter schools during the pandemic. Many of your schools participated in the survey on which this study is based, and we are really excited to share with you the collective findings. I think you will agree that the research paints a picture of resilience and innovation of our New York charter schools. All right, shout out. We are joined today by Dr. Margaret Raymond, who has served as the director of CREDO since its inception. You all know her better as Mackie. She has steered the group to national prominence as a rigorous and independent source for policy and program analysis. Meg Carter-Mazzola is the communications director for CREDO, where she leads the effort to disseminate CREDO's rigorous research on student achievement and education policymakers and decision makers. We can all give a virtual round of applause to welcome them to our webinar on that right now. I'm going to turn it over to them. Welcome.
Well, thank you, everyone. Mackie here, and we are thrilled to be with you, not only because we always enjoy being with our charter school friends in New York, but also because we think we have a pretty phenomenal story to share with you today. I do want to give a shout out to Meg Carter-Mazzola, my teammate, who has done a phenomenal job making sure that the work that the rest of the research team does really finds its way forward after we've done the analytic work and prepared a report. By the time our team gets to the end of a project, we're pretty much ready to fall over. And what happens then is that Meg sort of props us up a little bit, but she takes the report and she runs with it. So you have to think about her as sort of the running back of our team. And she comes up with great plans for making sure that our work gets into the right hands at the right time. So we are thrilled to be here with you today, especially in light of the words that you heard today about the budget and legislative season and the election of your new regent and the ongoing challenge of bringing great education options to all students in New York State. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to share with you the story of you. Can everybody see that? Good. Let me just take this full screen. There. Okay. The only other thing I have to do is figure out how to make this work. All right. So here we go. All of you know that in the very beginning of the pandemic, CREDO jumped on the idea that charter schools were probably going to be called on to provide the same kind of remote instruction as district schools. And frankly, we went into that with the with the sort of working thought that it would be potentially more difficult in a charter school environment because of the lack of deep central office institutional resources for a lot of schools and even many of the networks. So we were quite surprised when we surveyed the New York charter schools in June of last year to learn how completely unified you were. Even though you're completely autonomous of each other, you were unified in the response that we saw in the way that you coped with the governor's order to close schools and to pivot to remote instruction. We knew that the pandemic didn't end there, and so we secured some additional funding, including a generous support from the Charter School Institute and the Research Foundation of the State University of New York, and some other foundations in other parts of the country to continue that investigation. And that's what we're bringing to you today. What I would like to do is to explain that we repeated some of the questions we asked the New York State schools last year in 2020. We repeated those questions for Washington State and California, referring back to those first few months. We didn't ask you that again. But then everybody at the beginning of the 2020-2021 school year, we pick up and everybody has the same questions. So we are presenting our analysis today across the 3 states, but I'm really going to zero in on what we've learned about New York. So the survey went out electronically, and I think by the time we issued the survey in the fall of 2021, we were already starting to see the beginnings of COVID exhaust. I'm sure you all have been super surveyed to death, and the fact that we got such incredibly strong responses from New York State for the second time in a row is just really a testament to your willingness to be transparent about the work and to show the good work that you all are doing. What you can see from this slide is that we got 2/3 of the charter schools in New York State to respond to our second survey. I think that's phenomenal. There are only 13 charter schools in Washington State, and there's a very, very assertive person at the association there who basically went to every single school and sat with them while they did the survey. So that's why we have 100% there. Not expecting that for your team. The real sad news here is that despite a phenomenal effort, and by phenomenal I mean like 5 or 6 waves of follow-up and individual solicitations of school leaders and funders getting involved, we did all kinds of a campaign in California to try to get the response rate up, and we struggled to get a 21%, to get more than 1/5 of the charter schools to actually respond. There's a different atmosphere in California legislatively, and I think this has something to do with the fact that people don't want information available because they don't know what's going to happen with it. We did a really fine job convincing the right people to respond to the survey. There's only one place in all of the responses where we are a little bit not representative of the populations that you serve, and that's in California. The share of Black and Hispanic students that we have in our survey in the schools that responded is lower than across the state. When we dug into that, it's because the specific geographic locations of, really like micro geographic locations of the charter schools differ from the state profile as a whole. We are actually much closer. If you look at, are you representative of the communities that you serve, we're much closer than these numbers appear. All right, so one of the questions that we asked you, we wanted to get a handle on sort of when the governor's order the schools closed, basically it all hit the fan all at the same time. And what we heard anecdotally and what we learned from our partners across the country was that you were responsible for doing everything you used to do in basically a completely different context. And in addition, there were some environmental and social and economic impacts of the school closures that added to your plate. And so what we really wanted to do was to find out, where did you focus first? And what you're looking at here is a list of all kinds of different things that you could have decided to put your energy into as you started to pivot to your remote options. And as you will see across the board, the states differed from each other in terms of what they said was urgent or very urgent. And that what we see in New York State almost entirely is a focus on getting students situated for a remote education experience and getting back to instruction as quickly as possible. So moving your instructional model, getting students internet, making sure that families and students understand what the new game is all about and how we're going to do school were the places that you really put your focus. After that, then we see that New York State was focused on the well-being. The charter schools in New York State were focused on the well-being of students and families. Fantastic. We did not see the kind of scattering that you see in the California numbers, where a number of schools, the number of schools that really wanted to focus on instruction is only about 3/4. You kind of want to say, what are the other quarter of schools doing? Because only 3/4 of the schools were really zeroed in on, we got to teach these kids. Very different story in New York State. And you can also see in the rest of the numbers that in other parts of the country, schools decided to really use their energy and their resources on things that were not specifically the purview of educated students. So, and I think this plays out as we go through the rest of the data. So first, good on you. Your primary business is education. You stuck to it. That's where you put your focus. And very quickly then pivoted to student and family well-being. This slide blows my mind. So I just want to give everyone here a huge shout out that when it took district schools weeks and weeks and weeks to even get in touch with families or get something going, and in many, many places across the country never got anything going, it took charter schools in New York State an average of 3 days to figure out what they were going to do and get on it. So I just think that this is a remarkable demonstration of the commitment that you have to serve the communities, the students, and the families that you have. Some evidence in the traditional district setting that a slow start didn't mean you never caught up, but we actually see a large number of public districts where the students are in high need categories, high poverty, high rates of student mobility, high concentrations of historically underserved students, taking the very longest to get back up and coming back up into the lowest levels of service. So you can't think about this as a 0-1 proposition. You were either doing something or you weren't. You did something, you know, one dimension is how quickly did you get going, and the charter school story is incredibly strong. And then the second dimension of that is, and then what did you come back with? And so we'll be talking about the rest of that as we move through the slides. But anyway, 3 days. I mean, I'm super impressed with that. Everybody take a deep breath here. Meg Cotter-Mazzola hates this slide, so I'm pretty sure that I'm going to get some backlash on this one too. But here's what you're looking at on this slide. What you're seeing on the left-hand boundary of this thing, which is called a Sankey chart, is how did the charter schools in our sample distribute across their instructional modalities. So you'll see here that in the first months of the pandemic, so March to June, and in that category, 4 charter schools actually maintained in-person attendance. And you can see that 78 did some kind of a combination of hybrid, in-person and remote. Remote was obviously the dominant category. 1 school just dried up, went home, and 23 did something else. And the something else is typically schools that served in areas where there wasn't reliable internet, so they were doing packets, or they were doing little outdoor cluster instruction, or they were trying to get teachers to go around and do little tutoring sessions in homes and so on. So 23 out of the group did something else. On the right hand, you'll see what the reported instructional model was for the 2021 school year. And so you can see that the 4 schools that started out in person as the schools were closed moved to become a hybrid school. But the hybrid schools start to move over into a variety of other things. So a whole bunch of them decide that they're going to do only remote, but all those remote schools say, no, wait a second, let's see if we can get back to a stronger presence with kids by going hybrid and so on. So what you're seeing here is that there was in fact a push to try to keep as much student contact and classroom based instruction as possible in this. But there was about half the sample that started out remote and just stayed remote the entire time. But otherwise, there's this almost equivalent push to get kids back in the classroom at least some of the time. And my view, listening to charter leaders and reading the open-ended comments, was that it was actually more difficult to do hybrid because you had to keep pivoting back and forth. But that this was, under those circumstances, what districts and schools and networks thought was the best possible option for their kids. Well, these are compared to what you can see across the country, that 3/4 of the schools in districts, in the largest districts, only started with remote only instruction, and less than 1/3 of them got back into person at any time during the school year. And basically 2/3 of the 100 largest were hybrid only by November. So basically a substantial, more than 1/3 of the school year had gone by without any sort of face-to-face contact. So when you think about this in terms of students and meeting their needs, you can see in this last piece from the American Enterprise Institute that there's significant disparities in terms of which kids and where are they located get back into in-person instruction. And this, of course, has a longer run implication and consequence in terms of what their learning eventually looks like at the end of the pandemic, and what's going to be required to bring them back up to grade level performance. Okay, so looking at what we see across the country, it was no question that schools had to make choices about what they focused on as program. And this table is a little bit of a surprise to me. This is the entire pool, all 3 states together. A greater proportion of schools dropped courses in the 2021 school year than they did in 1920. And when we read the open-ended commentary from the respondents, there was a recognition that students themselves and teachers as well, but primarily students, just didn't have the bandwidth to have the full complement of all of the activities and coursework. That some of these things, particularly in a remote instructional modality, just didn't come across well, and that it was more of a source of frustration than a source of instruction. So that's why we see the rise in the number of the choice to reduce the academic load for kids. I'm very glad to see that where schools offered choices in the 2021 school year, they didn't compromise on course goals. I will say that there are a couple of places where I am concerned. Modifying graduation requirements, nearly 1/5 of high schools, nearly 1/5 of the schools in the sample, but as high schools go, about 1/3 of high schools modified their graduation requirements, and across the entire sample, 40% modified their promotion requirements. That doesn't bode well for the out years. I understand there might be some social, emotional justification in the short term, but I think that this is actually planting seeds that are not going to bloom well in the future. Okay, you also changed your calendars, and I want you particularly to look at the purple bars here because largely because of the intensity of having to look at a screen all day, half of the schools that responded to our survey shortened their school day. They made other calendar changes, and what that means is they mixed and they modified their schedules for professional development days, or they tapped into days that would have been theme days or field trip days to do other things. About a fifth of New York charters started late, and only 10% of the respondents said that they extended the school day. So 5 times more charter schools shortened the day, then decided to try to extend the school day to try to prevent additional learning impacts. However, this is a place where districts actually look slightly different. They were less likely to shorten the school day. That has to do with teacher contracts. They did, however, have a greater inclination to decrease the number of school days than you saw nation as a whole. It's about the same as we see in New York State. Reducing the instructional minutes was a common thing. And as we saw in the last slide, cutting out some non-core courses was a pretty common but not predominant choice among districts. So what's interesting to me is that you see these different opportunities around the country, these autonomous decision-making units trying to figure out how to balance time and effort and energy and resources and figure out where they put their emphasis. And so what I think is interesting is that schools didn't want to modify course content. They modified course content and they modified.
All right, I went to that other one. Can't even get the audio on that.
I can't hear what you said. Martin?
I think it was a mistake. Martin, if you want to raise hand to ask a question, feel free, but we muted you and don't feel,
okay, I'll just
don't
go
have
on
big feelings about it. Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Maggie.
Okay, we're almost done. Okay, somehow these slides got out of order. I wanted to show you that in New York State, you actually did some of these things in greater numbers than we saw as the sample as a whole, particularly the dropping of courses and the modifying of graduation requirements. Particularly concerned as students are in their upper grades, 7th, 8th, 9th, and all the way through high school, that this actually diminishes their post-secondary opportunities. And so I'm hoping that there is some ancillary planning going on, either with the association or with authorizers or among yourselves, to try to figure out how to make up some of the gap of that, because it's not just the core courses that are going to make for a student being ready for post-secondary. And I really hope that that we don't see students exiting their secondary years with essentially a transcript that looks a little bit like Swiss cheese. Measuring attendance has been a really, really big deal. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this other than to say that I was pleasantly surprised that in spite of many places in the country abandoning attendance tracking, and we see the consequences of that this year in the 21-22 school year, we actually see that there was a strong push, possibly by the authorizers, possibly by the association, but also taken up to try to figure out on a consistent basis where your students were and what you were doing with them. And I just want to say that the fact that these are not mutually exclusive. Schools could do many things, but if you ask, did you do anything about attendance? 96% of the New York State schools reported that they had a practice that they adopted and that they kept up with in making sure that their students were there. And we'll have another thing about engagement further on. What I find amazing is that in the 2021 school year, the district systems that came online used absolutely the most minimum standards for attendance. So literally, if you were a hybrid school and you were in a remote mode, if you activated your Zoom link once a day, that would count, and you got a full credit. Now, there's obvious budget implications that go with that, but the standard of comparison and the degree of concern about student engagement that those kinds of numbers reveal is very disturbing. So I think you have a great story to tell on the charter side of the ledger. Maybe some regent or other would like to know that. Okay. In spite of the fact that New York State charters reported that they had to reduce content in order to manage the whole system in through June of 2021, I want to show you here your purple bars. You folks kept it up in terms of being able to get the preponderance of a school year delivered instructionally. And so you covered, well over 4/5 of the material in the core 4, and then also went beyond that. We saw most district schools did not do foreign arts, did not do foreign language, did not do drama, did not do any electives of any kind, and yet you still managed 2/3 of your schools or more managed to keep up with some enrichment academics as well. These are phenomenal numbers. I just hope you feel great about what they say, because the counterfactual data here is just not anywhere close. Okay, I want to talk about teachers. I know that we're mostly leaders here, but I want to just give a moment to shout out on what teachers did. What you're looking at here is we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 5 bands of different activities on which teachers could spend their time. And the question was, let's use the bottom one, providing student feedback. Did you end up decreasing, somewhat decreasing, stay the same, somewhat increase, or significantly decrease? So what you want is you want to look at how much is the purple, the black, and the green as a proportion of the entire spread here. And I'm just really impressed with how much increase of effort teachers report spending their time on. So supporting extracurricular activities is the least of what people spent their extra time on. And yet almost all of these responses show that you at least maintained effort, if not increased even in that. Communicating with administration, leading advisories, taking care of sort of the administrative stuff. And we know that that grew a lot during COVID. Providing student feedback. Look at how much time was spent on interacting with students to give them feedback. That's pretty amazing. And then this is the sort of the core part of the work. Unfortunately, conducting COVID protocols stayed the same or increased, but communicating with families. Look at the black and the green. Look at how much teachers stepped up and stepped in to make sure that families were partnered well and supported well, holding office hours for kids, planning lessons, and leading classes. They spent actually, for the most part, more time, at least as much or more time across all your schools, focusing on instruction. So again, the counterfactuals, when you look at the surveys that the Center for Reinventing Public Education have done across the 100 largest districts, these bars don't look anywhere like it. There's lots and lots of yellow, and there's lots and lots of magenta, as opposed to this. So this is a story to tell your legislators. This is a story to tell your communities, your funders. These are incredible demonstrations of over and above effort. So what does this mean then? We asked each school leader about whether they decreased learning time by the end of the first 3 months of school. And what you see here is in all of these different, when I go to big screen, the legends move off, but math and ELA are on the last 2 columns. Did you decrease? 70% said they decreased learning time in math and English language arts. Oh, less than a fifth said they made significant decreases. So my sense here is they were careful about what changes they made because they knew that there were some things that were clearly more valuable than others. And so they tried to minimize the hits on history, social studies, math, and ELA. Now let's find out in the subsequent school year, relative to what happened in the first year, how'd you do? And what you see here is that there's actually much better results in, I'm sorry, I'm saying this backwards, that there were further decreases. So compared to what you taught in the 1920 school year, and this includes the pandemic, what was taught in the 2021 school year, about a third of the schools said they were still decreased. And but the number that had significant decreases went down dramatically. And so what this says here is that there's a sort of a mechanism of coping that the schools undertook to try to figure out how to best allocate time and resources and focus and figure out what the essentials, the absolute must-haves were, and modify programs and delivery around that, and then do what they could to make sure that they supported their kids to avoid significant decreases in learning time for their kids. So we asked one final question here, which is, since the pandemic began, what's your estimate of the proportion of kids who have had considerable loss in learning or a major loss in learning? The black is the combination of considerable and major, and the yellow bar is those that have just major. These numbers, while they are very concerning, are dramatically smaller than what is being reported for district schools. And so I think there's a little bit of potential self-interest here. We call that moral hazard in the academic world, that you might want to make that look as good as possible. On the other hand, you might not. If you're looking at gathering a whole bunch of resources to try to get over the pandemic, you might want to make that number as high as possible. We think those two things basically balance each other out. So these are probably pretty close to true. 43%, less than half, said considerable or major loss. About half in New York State, about a quarter of your schools said it's a major loss. Those are disturbing numbers, to be sure, but relative to what was going on in district schools, those are good numbers. So I'm going to draw it to a close here and drop my screen and make myself available to the group. There.
Well, anyone should feel free to come off mute. And I would just say, New York Charter folks, I hope that you recognize a couple things. Number one, Mackie does not give compliments lightly. She gives them based in data, and that this data is real and it is significant, and it is a testament to, like, literally blood, sweat, and tears. We know what 2020 and 2021 was like for many of you. So I won't over narrate. I will pause because she is really here for you to ask questions. But then I know that Yomika also has some thoughts for all of you about how important all of these takeaways are in the context of your identity and your communications with elected officials and policy advocacy. So you have Margaret Raymond of Credo right here with you.
Careful what you wish for.
I'll ask
Okay,
just one question, Mackie. Oh, so I'll just ask one quick question, Yomika. Sorry, this is the wonk in me, because I've been really intrigued at the sort of shameless promotion of graduation rates that I've seen at least going on in New York urban districts. Have you seen that too, Mackie? I see you sort of nodding. And when you talk about sort of someone's Swiss cheese high school preparation, it has felt incredibly dangerous. Especially for urban districts where graduation rates are such make or break things, and that they're going to have these peaks and then potentially these valleys when waivers go away. And I'm just curious, like, did California and Washington or other states that you've looked at, even in different contexts, have the types of significant high school graduation waivers? Like, just generally speaking, do you have any sort of database or observational trend lines around high school graduation that you'd like to share?
Well, this is not going to surprise you, but the state education departments who hold those data have been reluctant, would that be the right word, to make those data transparent. They eventually have to, because they have to report those. But when I say stall, obfuscate, balk, and lose emails, that begins to describe the behavior that we have seen. I will say that we have other survey and observation data through other sources. And the expectation that comes through from those data are that somebody, now everybody thinks somebody else is going to solve that problem, right? That the community colleges already do remediation. They can just take it up, right? Or, oh, well, the colleges can just, sort of do a little bit of extra. It's so not matched to the reality. And the real concern for me, and this is not a charter thing, this is a school-wide thing, is that it's so easy to get on the slope of saying, well, I'm just going to shave a little bit more off. I'm just going to shave a little bit more off. I'm just going to shave a little bit more off. And I can tell you that graduation requirements across the country have just plummeted. They were already on a decline. We were already on that slippery slope. And this has just accelerated a decline in the quality of what a diploma represents, to the point where there are discussions in higher ed now about potentially having restricted enroll applications, that they won't accept applications from places where they just over and over and over again know that the students are just not well prepared. They're not going to do it to the students. They're not going to endorse that in the secondary system. And so it makes sense to me that this is a focus that you're concerned about. It's a focus that we're concerned about too.
Well, I won't say good, but thank you. Sorry, Yomika, I didn't mean to cut you off earlier.
No, that's actually perfect segue into what I was going to say to close us out. And just first of all, thank you for taking the time and sharing this research. Thank you for conducting this research. Thank you, of course, to all the schools who participated in this research.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to really, the point that you just made about the impact of the study sort of in the real world. So when colleges are talking about things like, our students are not prepared, we may not even want to see them, may not accept, admission from even that they're even considering those kind of things. That's exactly what's happening here in New York. So I want school leaders to really sort of pay attention and be keyed in on this. In the at the hearing, the joint budget hearing, the majority leader of the assembly, right, and we all know or should be familiar with her because she's carrying a bill on moratoriums for Buffalo and will be key in, whether anti-charter, pro-charter, any kind of education bills go through the assembly. essentially has that same fear. She said in the hearing that schools, and she was not talking to charter schools, she was talking to the superintendent of the school district in Buffalo, and said students are not prepared for college. They're getting through high school, and then they find that they get to college and they find out there they have to do exactly what you just said, Mackie, that they have to take remedial courses now. They're not prepared. And she's hearing from colleges that students are not prepared. So a study like this that can show, here's what happens, right? So here's what charter schools are doing. Here's how they're working toward not diluting the degree, not taking away time from the classroom, trying to make it work even during the pandemic. And I want schools to understand that kind of information, that kind of sharing information about what your schools did, what schools in New York are very important, and legislators in New York State are interested. They're asking those questions. They're interested in the issues that are impacted by what's been studied in this report. So thank you very much for Credo for doing that. Policymakers are also other policymakers and legislators are also interested in this. Senator John Liu has raised these kind of issues, and we are. I know more introduction is needed for who he is in New York State. What did charter schools do during COVID? What did they do during the pandemic? How did they respond? That question comes up a lot. This study gives us answers to those questions that we can share and point to. So please, everybody, take the opportunity to study this, study, right? Take a look at it. Think about what your talking points are. Think about what your takeaways are. We're here to help you answer any questions. I hope that Mackie and company, if there are any big questions we can't answer, we can get those answers from you and share with the charter community. But thank you so much for this, folks. Pay attention and take some time to read this. This is good stuff.
Thank you, everyone. Love being with you today. And thank you for everything that you all do to keep students moving forward. You are the lifeline for so many thousands and thousands of kids. So thank you for your work.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today, everyone. As always, we're going to post today's recording in the Resource Center on our website. Please reach out to us if you have any questions about the topics discussed here as we said, or if you're interested in having your school present at one of our upcoming webinars. But please check out the study. Please contact us with any questions about how to use that for talking points and more. Our monthly webinars are made possible through the contribution and commitment of our member schools. We appreciate the ability to host these forums for the full New York Charter School community. If you are not a member of the association, we encourage you to join today by emailing membership@nycharters.net. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thanks, Mackie and Meg.